I am Matthew Martin. I am a product designer, and I studied human-computer interaction at the University of Michigan. But I didn't start out as a product designer. I was actually a photographer, and I was working as a biomedical photographer in a lab at a research hospital in Baltimore. And it was great. And it was kind of like, photography is this machine that creates lots of different images. And at the beginning of photography in the late 1800s, people were like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're using this machine to do all these things, and it's going to kill painting or whatever." And as we see, this is just one of those technologies that took over something, and then you fast forward later, and photography has totally been taken over by computers. At this time, I was using chemicals, and I was in a darkroom, and everything was a wet process. And as you know now, that's very much a niche. What would I say? Pastime. I don't know. Some people still enjoy it. I haven't done it in years, and while I was there as a photographer, that's kind of when I knew things were changing quite a bit, especially for my discipline, especially for photography. Because at that time, I started going onto the web and searching out what was happening, and I really got excited by it. I saw the potential of it. I definitely saw the potential of the World Wide Web and images. And as you can see on the right, that is my first wireframe, if you will. And I didn't know I was creating a wireframe. I was just sketching out how I wanted to build a website, because there were no schools to figure out how to build a website. So you kind of did it on your own. But the important thing here is that one of the tools is pen and paper, and it's still a very important tool and something I use all the time. I still do photography in different ways, but I also create art in many different types of medium, whether it's digital or just using a pen and paper. But whenever I'm working as a product designer, I'm usually starting out, just making some sketches and throwing around some ideas. So I left photography and I came to Michigan. And when I was at the University of Michigan, I had this great opportunity to go to the Upper Peninsula. So Ann Arbor's way down here. And then we had this project called the Cultural Heritage Preservation Institute. And what we did is we went through all over to the different tribes of Native Americans in the Upper Peninsula, and we gave them computers and cameras, and we taught them how to capture their culture and put it online. So it was like, hey, I'm just learning how to make these things. I'm going to teach you how to make these things. It was a great experience bringing technology to people that didn't have it, and also to just see things that normally you don't get to see in a way, and to experience other people's culture and help them capture that culture. And I think that's one of the great things about the internet, especially then, but ongoing, is it keeps growing and capturing all those different facets of what it means to be a human, or beyond. We'll get to that. So while I was at U of M, I got an internship at March 1st. And as you can see, this was during the boom, right? I got an internship. I was getting paid well. It was amazing. I was like, well, should I even go back to school? I mean, why? I'm doing what I love. I'm being called an information architect. We're doing
recording in progress.
Oh,
sorry, I forgot to hit record.
That's all right. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm an information architect, still in school, making good money. And I'm throwing Photoshop up there because that was kind of like the first tool we used to make wireframes. Sure, there weren't really wireframe programs then, so it was like Photoshop or just whatever you could just get your hands on. And so they convinced me, no, why don't you go back to school? Your job will be here waiting for you. Well, as you can see, the dot-com bubble burst. This is when I graduated from the School of Information, and there was no job. So I kind of had to think about, what was I going to do? Well, because the School of Information is also a library school, I looked and found a digital librarian position at Wayne State. And what was really cool about this is that I was responsible for their digital collections. And so that meant dealing with old photographs, negatives and glass plates and different types of artifacts. So that kind of like really kind of merged a lot of things for me. Like I understood some of these ways of photography and how to digitize them. But what was the main thing here was making sure that the right metadata was attached to them. And what was great is having a bunch of graduate students like yourselves. We would go to these different museums and find out what they had, and we would digitize them and describe them using metadata. And the tool overwhelmingly was spreadsheets, right? And I'll have to say that spreadsheets are one of the biggest design tools that I still use, especially when communicating with other stakeholders, because everyone loves a spreadsheet. Everyone can interact with a spreadsheet. And that's kind of a theme that will happen as we go through some more of these slides, that, a spreadsheet may seem antiquated, and it is in many ways, but it's still everywhere. Okay, so while I was at Wayne State as a digital librarian, I was doing some freelance information architecture. And for one of the companies was Campbell Ewald. Campbell Ewald is a company that started out in Detroit in the early 1900s doing advertising for Chevrolet. But they grew and they had many different clients. And one of their clients was Altel, which is an old phone carrier. What was cool with this is they didn't really have any information architects or user experience designers. They weren't sure what we should be called, but we were very much doing wireframes, and we were trying to understand how people were using technology. We were doing usability studies, etc. So at that time, we were called an experience planner. It's kind of weird. When I told people, they were like, "What are you, a wedding planner? You plan these experiences?" I'm like, "No, it's digital, and it's, we're working with computers and whatnot." And what I'm showing here, which was really cool for the time, this was just before the iPhone came out. This is called CellTop. And as you can see, there's these little widgets, and this would be on a flip phone. And you had, different ways to have widgets and information on here. They're not quite apps. It was just before apps, but you probably have never heard of CellTop because it was gone as soon as the iPhone came out. So that killed everything. And I'm showing that I'm using OmniGraffle at that time. These tools are all changing, but they're all kind of the same in the end. Well, while I was at Campbell Ewald, they were very much connected to the car companies. And this was just before the financial crisis, when it kind of like affected the car companies, but it was affected the housing market, etc. So I saw the writing on the wall as things were starting to freak out in the automotive industry. So I'm like, okay, I've got to bail. I'm going to try to find something else in the digital realm. And that's when I went to Brulant, which is right here. And I was actually called a user experience designer and eventually a user experience director. So now we're starting to get into like, hey, what are we being called? What is this that we do? And the two tools that we were using there was Visio, which was, I couldn't believe we were using that, but that was one of the tools. But Axure, which is still around today, which is really powerful, we started to transition to that. But that wasn't until we started buying all these companies. So it started out, I worked for Brulant, which was kind of like a startup. A lot of e-commerce websites, dealt with, usability studies with shopping carts and iterating. And we started to first get into app design. So I developed an iPhone app that, as you were buying different prescription drugs or over-the-counter drugs, it knew as you bought other things if it was going to have an interaction, and it would alert you like, oh, you shouldn't buy this, or you need to talk to your doctor, etc. So that was a lot of fun. But I was there for about 4 years. But as you can see, during that time, Brulant was bought by Rosetta, so we grew, and then Rosetta bought Level, and then we grew some more, and then they were bought by Publicis. And then finally, that's when I left. I was like, it was so much chaos and so much change and so much, like rebranding. I was like, what are we doing? Who are we doing it for? It got kind of crazy. And as you can see now, Rosetta is now just kind of like a footnote. It just got bought up by Sapient Razorfish, and it's not even, I don't know. I couldn't find any more information on it. So that's when I met Tanya. I left Rosetta, came to Ithaca, where I met her, and I was called, I don't know what her title was, but mine was Experience Architect. And we were using Sketch to create different wireframes and different things, and what I was working with there was heavily on metadata. And as you can see, I was developing a way to import metadata using a spreadsheet, because that is what most people wanted to use when they were describing their artwork. And as you can see, this is a way to bring in metadata to describe different types of artifacts. So this is kind of going back to when I was a digital librarian. Now I'm kind of designing for people like me, right? So I was a digital librarian. I would have definitely bought this software or used this software. So what we were working with here is what is the easiest way to get metadata in, and what ways can we make it easier and remove steps. And what was really interesting at this time is librarians and archivists, they weren't so keen on removing steps or going with best practices as far as user experience goes, where we try to make things streamlined and quick and efficient. They actually wanted some friction to see how their data was being used, how we were interpreting it. And eventually this was kind of the first time I started using artificial intelligence. And how can we, how could a large language model look at metadata, and what could they do with it, and what could they connect to that metadata? Could it connect to other artifacts? Could it connect to vocabularies like the Getty vocabulary, where they could be more consistent with their naming? So that was a lot of fun, and it was kind of like at the beginning of when artificial intelligence was starting to make a name for itself. But what I learned quickly is when I started to do these things, there was a lot of hallucinations, a lot of the data couldn't be used, and that's something that archivists and librarians, they want to be able to trust the data, and they just weren't trusting what was coming through. And so that was a really interesting exploration. The next place I went to was Ubiquia. So now I'm actually called a product designer, right? That's what we're called now, or some people are. Again, spreadsheets were huge because, again, I was working with artificial intelligence. What was happening is this company had a bunch of sensors on the electrical grid. So imagine, you've got thousands of transformers out there, and they're tracking the waveform for the voltage. They're tracking temperature. They're even tracking if there's a tilt with the pole. And that's what these kind of dashboard is like. At the very highest level, I can kind of see my deployment of all of this stuff. And we're sucking in all this data. Artificial intelligence is making predictions, and it's making some good calls on what's happening with that. All the way down, so as you start to drill down, we're looking at this voltage waveform. And this is down to the millisecond, which is great. So this project was a way to, how do we think about data, and how do we allow a human to munch and think about all this data? Sure, artificial intelligence could take all kinds of data and do all kinds of great things with it. But how do we get a human to be able to deal with all that information from this high level all the way down to the millisecond? So that was a lot of fun. Definitely a lot of subject matter experts I had to talk to, a lot of stakeholders. Like, you couldn't really do typical usability testing where you can go out and recruit people, because these people just didn't really exist, right? You can't. You have to really talk to the technical people. You have to talk to the people that work out there online. You have to talk to people that are in the control room. So it was very much learning a different language. I had to understand what electrical engineering was and understand the data so I could design with the data, because I couldn't just, like I said before, can't just rely on best practices with UX or some of those, tools of the trade, because a lot of times this special audience wants special things, and they have needs that, you really have to test for and talk to them. The cool thing here is we started to transition to Figma. They were using Adobe XD, but I know that Adobe XD is now kind of like in maintenance mode. And so one of the cool things we did there was transition their, I guess it was like a proto design system, and brought it over to Figma so they could actually have a little bit more robust design system. And then finally, this is where I'm at today. I'm at Hilton Grand Vacations, called a product designer. We're full on using Figma. And what we're working on here is this is an artificial intelligence itinerary builder that builds an itinerary for you based on what we know about you, because Hilton Grand Vacations, these are people that own property. And this is our little chat bot that's part of the itinerary builder, where you can talk to it and say, hey, you built this thing for me. Day 2 looks good, but day 3 doesn't look good. And you can interact with it, talk to it, talks back to you. And this is still very much, I don't know, we're training it ourselves, but we're part of an open AI underneath. So there's a lot of like flux here and a lot of changes and a lot of things that we're doing. But I'm showing a mobile interface, but when we did the interviews with our owners, is they want to use the mobile interface when they're vacationing, but they're going to use a computer or a laptop when they're doing their actual research and building our itinerary. So this is a great project that's still ongoing. Another thing that I'm doing there is they have acquired many different companies and they have a lot of back-end systems, and what we're trying to do is figure out how to bring all those other systems together. They all have different working parts. They all have different behaviors. People use them in different ways. So this is a pretty big project. And what I'm showing here again is spreadsheets. This is 2 people's workflow. So this would be a planner that goes into a fulfillment agent. Don't need to know that. I guess all I'm trying to say is this is like talking to customers, building a rapport, marketing and whatnot. But there's so much going into these spreadsheets that they should all be going to, something central, right? So we can use all this data, and then we can use an artificial intelligence that we're training to take that data and do something with it. So that's one of the things that I want to point out here, is that Excel is still a thing. Technology is moving super fast. There's so many cool tools and technology out there, but some people are still doing things very much a manual and old way. And that's why I have this quote here: the future is already here, but it's just not evenly distributed. And it isn't. I mean, some of these interfaces that we're dealing with they don't use a mouse, right? It's just keyboard only. And it is, monochromatic. There is no GUI. So there's a lot of different types of technology that are out there that you may encounter and have to deal with. So I guess that's one of the things that you have to think about, is like, how do I be adaptable? And so I got these 2 guys on here because it's like, what is it that I do? When someone's like, what is it that you do here? I don't really know. Like, I've been doing the same thing. That technology has changed quite a bit, but people don't change that much. So it's really dealing with people. And this is how I deal with stakeholders. And I can't believe how this came from my mom from 1986. She was teaching a class in industrial organizational psychology. And anyway, I was complaining about creating some kind of deliverable, and the client didn't even look at it, and I was just discussing, like, I'm in usability, we're trying to do the right thing here. And she gave me this little cartoon from the 80s, and I was like, this is so hilarious and hurtful at the same time, because it's like the same thing, it's still going on. So here's like as sales requested it, right? Sales wants this really cool triple decker swing, and then production ordered it incorrectly, and it has 3 ropes. You got engineering, how they designed it and they messed it up, how the lawyers approved it. Because, I mean, every time you design something, and if it's going to go out into the world, it's got to pass through legal. And that's where a lot of great ideas die. Management, advertising, how the plant installed it, right? Like, how is it getting interpreted? But this is actually what the customers wanted. And I was just like, it's so nice to see that. Yes, you've got to make sure you're talking to the customers. And even though UX has now been around for a while, it's still important to advocate that we need to talk to users. It's not just, hey, you're a UX professional, just UX it. It's like, yeah, no, that's not how it works. Another thing that I came across that really resonated, kind of like, as things change, they stay the same. There was in 1930, in this commercial art magazine, they released what they called the new typography, and it was like kind of like a manifesto for constructivism in typography. And it had these like 6 principles designed for real needs, typography is a functional tool, etc. And on the right side, I was able to like really connect the dots of function over tradition and how they wrote about it in the 1930s and how we think about it today, like with accessibility, where they were saying, well, we need to prioritize prioritize visual logic and reject tradition in decoration, so it's got to be function. And it's like, yeah, we do the same thing. We need to think about the user needs. We need to think about accessibility. And it goes on, right? One of my other favorites is this last one here. Typographers must collaborate with technical experts, like architects with engineers. And I'm like, yeah. I spend most of my time dealing with engineers and product managers to make sure that we're all thinking about the same thing. We're creating the same thing so that when I hand over designs, they are building it in a way that is correct, or we're collaborating. So like when I design something and it's not the best way to do things, a lot of times engineers will be that inspiration to like, what is a better way to build this? And I think another thing is your designs are, no pun intended, a figment of your imagination in Figma, because nothing happens until an engineer builds it, right? Unless you're going to build it yourself. So I think it's also important to think about that as you're building and creating. You need to partner closely with engineers to make sure things are getting built the right way. Another thing that keeps striking me as something that never changes is, in the first GUIs in the 70s, the trash can was always this icon, right, of how we're going to do things and how we think about the interface. And I remember someone saying, with the advent of artificial intelligence, like, I think everything is just going to become a command line. Like, there's going to be no user interface. And I'm like, I don't think so. Because a lot of times when you're dealing with the artificial intelligence, the thing that comes out sometimes needs to be visual. When you're interacting with any kind of interface, you have to have some type of GUI, or, it could go away with voice. But it was just funny that, yeah, when you're in ChatGPT even today, there's that wonderful trash icon. It's just ubiquitous, keeps coming around. Okay, so finally, what is it that we do? So I try to figure that out too. Like, there's all these umbrellas, how UX solves problems, and there's an umbrella of visual design and usability, and then there's the Nielsen Norman Group says, human computer interaction. Yay, okay, right, like, I remember that. And user experience design, blah 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 blah. And then you've got this other one that includes all these different people, and I'm just like, we still just don't know, do we? So Jacob Nielsen came out with this great article a year or two ago called UX Vocabulary Inflation. And he was saying how, yeah, we have always dealt with this. We've always dealt with, what do we call it? And he listed the different disciplines it was called from 1983. You got man-machine interface, user-friendly systems, human factors and ergonomics. That's what my mom was teaching, and that's how I got that nice little printout. Then we got into HCI, which I think, you are in here. But, there's still like these different titles. And even for me, as from when I started till now, I've got information architect, experience planner, and on and on. And I'd like to argue that not only is UX dealing with, what do you call it, inflation, right? What the hell is design? I mean, design, this is a true sentence. This sentence is grammatically correct. Design is to design a design to produce a design. And it was our friend here who said that, because design is a noun, it's a concept, but it's also a process, right? And then a design can also be the output of that thing, which is also a deliverable. So UX design, I mean, it's so plagued with like, what is it that we do? So it's very abstract. It's hard to explain. But I think at the very end of the day, it's just, we're solving problems using design that are going to help make, either a process better, an app better, or, as he says, we're going to make the quality of human life better by using design. I've been using all of these tools all of the time. I'm still using Photoshop, and a lot of these have kind of gone away. And now that we're using Figma, Figma is, half of it's artificial intelligence now. It's all just kind of merging together. But all of these tools were really just to express thoughts and thinking and flows, right? Or screens. That's all these tools all do the same thing. And I think Saul Bass said it the best. Design is thinking made visual. So it's really, we're communicators. We're trying to communicate to users. We're trying to communicate to engineers and stakeholders. Just like, this is what we're trying to create, and this is why we're creating it. And I think this guy was way ahead of his time. Buckminster Fuller, he said, a designer is an emerging synthesis of artist, inventor, mechanic, objective economist, and an evolutionary strategist. So he was thinking about design in a huge and magnificent way. And that's what I try to bring to, like, sure, you have to think about the button and the color of that button, but also you have to zoom way out and think about how is that whole thing being used and what are you creating. Okay, that's me. You can ask questions. I just wanted to kind of circle back to what I did and like how does that manifest. Tanya, what were you called back in the Ithaca days? What was your title?
UX strategist. I was a UX strategist.
UX
All right,
strategist.
I pulled out the microphone so he can hear you. All right, you have questions? Get a good way. Questions? Stretch. You're gonna have to stretch.
Hi Matthew. It was a really insightful conversation, and obviously seeing the breadth of experience and the time you've spent in the industry, you would have a really nice idea of how things are gonna progress with AI and stuff. But you mentioned there is a point in which your higher ups or people might just say you exit because of the you're saying dispersion of common UX principles have been so prevalent that everyone might know of the Fitz rule, or for example any cognitive overload, but still you think that there's a need for UX people out there, and is that just for exercising designs, or is that for more of them to be more creative, or how could we justify the rule for designers now with AI coming up with design and stuff? So I just wanted your input in that front.
That's a great question. I guess it goes back to something like this. So we're designing software for subject matter experts, and they have a lot of them. A lot of the product managers for this, and this is the agent experience of selling different properties. And to sell a property, there's a lot of different workflows, but there's also a lot of regulations. There's a lot, right? Now, they started off by just doing what you were both saying, where, well, let's just UX it. Let's go screen by screen and make the screens better. And that gets you only so far. What we started to see pretty soon is as we were building screens in this way, that it just wasn't, we were basically building rooms in a house that didn't exist. So that's kind of like where we took a step back and we said, okay, we need to think about this in a different way. We need to think about how all of these different moving parts work together. And we started to look at the behaviors, because what they were thinking is they have all these antiquated systems. Like I said, they have even the monochromatic, you don't even have a GUI. It's like, well, just throw a GUI on it and it's going to be better, right? Well, not in practice. It's hard to take all those different things and to see them if you're not trained in design. So that's what I brought. I was like, okay, well, we're going to look at this in a totally different way. We're going to look at it from the lens of the person. We're going to look at it through the lens of behaviors. And then we're going to figure out where there's some inefficiencies. Then we're going to start building screens. So we try to get out of what's best practices and really just studying doing task analysis, doing some contextual inquiry, doing a little bit of ethnographic, what does your workspace look like? And I found out that one of these workspaces, they have 2 monitors, and they couldn't even show me because I was interviewing them and it was remote, and they're like, well, I can't even show you everything because I can't share 2 monitors at once. And they said, not only that, I print off some of these spreadsheets and they're hanging on my walls. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, all of this information that you need access to quickly, you are creating all these workarounds. So to understand that and then to communicate that and map it out and then to design around that takes someone like ourselves that are being trained in design and to do those things. So there's very much a place for design to happen and for our discipline, especially with all the different tools that are coming out. Like, someone could just, say, hey, here's some product requirements. I'm going to throw this into the latest artificial intelligence tool, and it's going to spit something out, and it's going to look great. It's going to look like an interface. But is it going to create more faster and better workflows? I doubt it, because if I could zoom in here, there's this one area right here where they tried to create a new app to take over this situation, or at least part of it. And what happened is they ended up just being another step in the process. So they built an app to take over, but then they still said, well, I still have to do all these other things, and now we have to input information here. So I guess that's where I see a huge need for us still. But you have to advocate for it, because these people don't know they need that. They don't know that they needed someone to look at it and map this out in this way. Does that answer your question?
He's nodding and he gave you a thumbs up.
All right. Yes.
Who else? Really? I have questions. So, Matt, you survived 2 bubble bursts, the .com burst and then the financial burst. I don't know. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
We've got different speakers in here, and it's like new. So, do you think we're on the edge of an AI bubble, or headed towards an AI bubble?
I don't know. So, not only did I survive those 2 bursts, but in 2023 I got laid off, and then 10 months later I got laid off. And that wasn't really because of artificial intelligence. I don't really know what's going on in our discipline or even in the world. And then you bring up the AI bubble. I definitely see it as, so at first I started, designing for it. So this is like, 2022, 2023. So like when ChatGPT and some of these Claude started to come around, you could start interacting with it. And, I knew some engineers that were kind of building some things, on their own. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to partner with you and I'm going to figure out how we can, train these things. I saw the potential of it for sure. But now that it's today, I would say almost every other day, there is a big leap, a new tool. Like even Figma has, Figma just took over, it has Nano Banana in it, and it's using Gemini 3 in it for its make, earlier today I threw a bunch of things at it and it spit out a bunch of code and an interface, and it's amazing because it wasn't there 2 days ago, and I didn't have to, it just showed up in it. Same with Photoshop. Like Photoshop it's now all just coming with these tools embedded in it. You don't have to go to it, but I still also go and use these tools. Like I think a really great one is Notebook LM by Google, where I put a lot of my user research in there. And then I have it, it's kind of like my user research partner where I'm like, okay, let's synthesize this data and let's think about these things in different ways, right? I can ask it a bunch of questions. But even with, Google has a new tool every other day, and things are just, other tools are spawning. It's hard to keep up. And I think that is kind of telling of, at some point, something's going to break, or you don't need all those tools. Like it's almost impossible for anyone to keep up with all those tools, to know which tool to use, right? So in a way, we're kind of like in that bubble. But I don't know if I don't know how I don't know how it works as far as monetarily. Like I've heard things like, well, NVIDIA is the maker of where all these artificial intelligence things think, right? But then someone said, well, they're using all their money to give money to other people that are building the models to use on their chips. So it's kind of like they're this incestuous money. I don't know. That's where it lost me, and I don't understand how it works. So it could be a bubble. I really don't know. It's freaky. Anyone out there know what's going on?
Anybody know? We don't know.
I don't think anyone knows, right? I mean, they're like, we don't even know how it works. I mean, I've heard people say that too. Like, our model's great. No, we don't know how it works though.
How do you stay current? How do you stay fresh? How do you keep learning?
I always try to look at the very next thing that's next to me, as far as like maybe in one of these umbrellas. Like, I was very much an information architect when I started. It was very much in library science. But as I found other things that I was interested in, like usability and user research, or even content strategy, those were other things that I was interested in. And then I finally got into more things like visual design. And now that I've have some of those things under my belt, I'm thinking about, well, how could I be a better front-end developer, or at least understand how front-end development works, so I can be a better partner to engineers. So basically, I'm not trying to learn everything. I'm just trying to like learn like the next thing that's kind of like close to what I'm working with. I guess where I spent a lot of time learning is with data. There's different types of data. Like, I was working with the electrical engineer, so I had to learn a lot about electrical engineering. Before that, I was learning a lot about metadata and how artifacts are being described. And then there's just, I guess that's what keeps it fresh, is just all the different problems. You can't really just design things, like I said, with just best practices. You have to understand how people want to see the data. So you have to understand data itself. And that's, I find that really exciting. So I'm always trying to think about that. And plus, I love all the tools that come on. I'm always playing with them. I'm always getting, it's pleasantly surprised and frustrated at the same time. It's like, oh, it did this, but I can't use it, right? I don't know. But yeah, ever since the beginning, it's always been something new. So I've always just been excited about learning things. So I guess you just have to be excited about learning, but it's impossible to know everything. And what I knew 5 years ago is irrelevant now, which is kind of frustrating, but that's just part of it.
Hi, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to speak with us today. What exactly, when you were a student back in Michigan, what did you learn and take away from our program?
Yeah, I think one of the more telling things, and it kind of I'm glad it kind of makes sense even today, is back then we were trying to come up with like cool ways to use technology, right? So one of our first group projects was we were working with the housing co-op. That was like our client that we were given. And we were going to the different co-ops because they needed to communicate to all the people that were living there, and they had to have interdepartmental and inter-co-op housing communication. We were thinking about some kind of cool like web interface where people could go on there and chat and whatnot. But as we started studying their behaviors, we tried to think about, well, what behaviors do they have that we can already use? Because changing human behavior, like when we start thinking about changing some of the steps that they have to do, that's hard to do. So what we wanted to do when I was at U of M is we looked at their behaviors and we're like, everyone has dinner. Everyone has to eat. Not everyone sits down to dinner, but that is the time where most of these people are together where they can communicate. And that was our solution. It was more of like, how do we use that ritual of eating and how can they disseminate information that way? And sure, they can use technology to compile that information and to share that information between houses or to the administration. But it was really about like looking at their behaviors, looking at what they're already doing and leveraging that and technology. So that's one of the things I took away.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You gotta be loud. You gotta be loud.
I just wanted your take on designing for AR, VR experiences or for like ubiquitous AI. Because like, I think the traditional way in which we've been exposed to designs like or technology through mobile phones or laptops possibly might be like coming to an end where like there's a new page that's going to be turned, and I personally think it's like either AR, VR or ubiquitous AI. So what's your take on that?
Yeah.
Did you hear the question?
Yeah. Well, my son is he very much spends a lot of time in the VR realm, and he has a YouTube channel where he talks about it and explores it and I guess promotes it. So I definitely see that is already part of someone's way that they're going to interface with computers, and it's definitely how he interfaces with a lot of people throughout the world. So he's got friends, in Germany and in where else? He had some friends that I didn't know that they had computers. But anyway, he spends a lot of time working with that and dealing with that, and I think about how we would design for that. Right now, like I said, the future is already here, so not evenly distributed. But I think that's going to be the fundamental things of how do humans perceive things, right? Human minds don't really evolve as fast as technology does. So we're going to have to lean back on, well, if they're going to go into this world of gorilla tag or what have you, you're still having to deal with the limits of what a person can perceive, their cognitive load, and even some of these, UX best practices is like, well, how many things are you going to put in their field of view at one time? How many things do they have to remember? And then testing it, right? Sure, you could create some cool things, and these kids, oh my gosh, they make some of the coolest stuff, and I don't even know how they did it without user testing, but they just release something, boom, and it's happening, right? But if you're going to start bringing this to corporate or to other things, you're going to have to sit down with a bunch of users and find out how they're going to interact with it. These kids are swimming in it like fish, but I don't think everyone's like that, and I think there's definitely going to be a part for us to help figure that out and translate that technology to people and to engineers, so we're building something right.